Public hearings begin today on Quebec's controversial Bill 21 that, if passed, will ban certain public sector employees from wearing religious symbols at work. For more, we're joined by Robert Leckie. He's the Dean of McGill University's Faculty of Law. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
The hearings begin today. They're set to end on May 16th. 36 groups and individuals who are mostly in favor of Bill 21 will be taking part. What will we hear from them?
Well, it's really striking, as you mentioned, the government was highly selective in issuing invitations for these hearings. So they excluded numerous mainstream religious groups, mainstream Muslim groups. What they're going to hear from the groups they cherry-picked, I think, will be support from the bill. There are some groups of people defending secularism or North Africans defending secularism. So they'll hear support for the bill for that. They'll also hear, though, some pretty trenchant criticism from people such as Professors Bouchard and Taylor, who were at the heart of this controversy over 10 years ago.
Which groups will be in favor of Bill 21 and why? What reasons are they giving?
Yeah, so I mentioned a North African group. There's a Muslims for Secularism group. So some of these groups will be saying that the state's hand here is helpful in freeing individuals from the pressure of their religions, in assuring a neutral public space where no one needs to see anybody's religious views. That's the sort of publicly articulable justification for the law. If you listen to the discourse that slips out from members of the government, or you see the things on social media, there's clearly a deeper kind of anxiety about Muslims, but people will try to keep that under wraps in the hearings this week.
Some people who hear this about who has been invited, who has been left out, would say this seems like a bit of a farce. The government really wants this to go through, and they're stacking the deck to make sure it does.
You said it. I mean, it's just a highly selective group of people. It's a much shorter consultation than you might normally expect on something as fundamental as this. This is a bill that's going to have clearly discriminatory effects on minorities. The government's using the nuclear weapons of the notwithstanding clause. It's amending its Quebec Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms. So it's a massive deal, and they're ramming the thing through because they have a mid-June deadline. They want to have this all finished before the summer legislative recess.
Yeah, Quebec Premier François Legault wants it in place by June 14th. There are some institutions, including several school boards and municipal governments, who have said, we do not plan to enforce this ban if it goes into effect. It affects a portion of their workforce. What would be the consequences for them if they don't follow Bill 21, if it passes?
There's a huge kind of gray zone around this because the law, as drafted, doesn't actually provide any sanctions. So it sort of states that there's a prohibition on wearing religious symbols. It says that authorities within institutions affected will need to apply the law, but it doesn't get into the details of how they're going to do it. And to be honest, it doesn't get into other key elements such as what exactly is a religious symbol. So the whole question of enforcement is going to be hugely complicated. You mentioned some groups have said they will not enforce it, but to be honest, the bill is so poorly drafted that even people intending to enforce it might not know how to do it. There's going to be a lot of controversy over whether someone wears a scarf on their head. How do we actually know whether they're doing it for religious reasons? Is it a fashion statement? Is it religious for you? How are they going to find out?
Premier Legault and his party have said they will rather use the notwithstanding clause to ensure that Bill 21 passes. So if the government goes this route, what could be the political ramifications?
Well, I think there are going to be political and legal ramifications because it's crucial to understand the notwithstanding clause blocks some avenues under the Canadian Charter, but there are still going to be other legal paths people will look at. But politically, I hope that the opposition parties opposed to this and civil society groups hold the government to account. And they say, look, you have used the notwithstanding clause to override rights. What's your reasons for doing so? Prove to us that it's justified. And so far, the government hasn't really made that case. It simply said, we can do this and we want to do it. But it hasn't yet kind of tried to persuade people why doing so is legitimate.
It is both fascinating and frightening to watch how this is progressed. Robert, thanks for joining us this morning.
My pleasure.
And just a note, we reached out to Premier Legault and his party for a comment on this interview. We had not heard back from them at this point.